On June 14, 2023, Jaylen Thompson and Tiffany Brooks were scheduled to be married at a small venue on the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia. Everything was in place. Guests had begun arriving, the decorations were complete, and the catering staff was setting up. The ceremony was to begin at 4 p.m. Jaylen and Tiffany had been together for 3 years. They met in 2020 during a volunteer cleanup initiative after a local flood. Jaylen, originally from Decatur, owned a small but successful auto repair business. Tiffany was a registered nurse at Emory University Hospital. Friends described them as devoted to each other and steady, an ordinary couple without secrets or complications. At approximately 2:45 p.m., Tiffany left the venue with her childhood friend Jessica Holloway to make a final stop at a beauty salon in Midtown, about 15 minutes away. The appointment was routine: hair touch-up, light makeup. They stayed inside for about 40 minutes. At 3:32 p.m., Tiffany and Jess exited the salon and walked toward Jess's parked vehicle, a silver Toyota Camry. As they reached the car, multiple shots were fired from across the street. Tiffany was hit in the chest and collapsed. Jess ducked behind the vehicle and was not injured. Witnesses reported a figure in dark clothing fleeing the scene through a side alley. No one was able to identify a face. First responders arrived within 5 minutes. Tiffany was pronounced dead at the scene. No shell casings were recovered, suggesting the use of a revolver or that the scene had been deliberately cleaned. Security footage from a nearby pharmacy captured a brief silhouette crossing the frame, but the image was indistinct. Back at the wedding venue, Jaylen was speaking with a caterer when he received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the line gave only one sentence: "She's not breathing." According to his later statement, he did not understand at first. When the meaning sank in, he sat down on the grass and didn't speak for several minutes. The ceremony was canceled. Guests were informed. The police cordoned off the salon and adjacent streets. Tiffany Brooks had no known enemies. Her financial records were clean. She had no pending legal issues, no history of domestic violence, no recent conflicts at work. Her phone records, checked by police that same day, showed no suspicious activity in the days leading up to her death. Investigators found no social media threats, no signs of stalking, and no communications that suggested she was under pressure or distress. Detectives from the Atlanta Police Department Homicide Unit opened a formal investigation at 6 p.m. A preliminary report described the shooting as deliberate, targeted, and professionally executed. The absence of any interaction between the shooter and Tiffany ruled out a spontaneous crime of passion. Jaylen Thompson was questioned the same night. He was cooperative and willingly provided access to his phone, his emails, and his home surveillance system. No link was found between him and the attack. His alibi, being at the venue throughout the day, was confirmed by over 20 individuals. Over the following days, detectives reviewed hours of video footage from nearby businesses. No clear face or vehicle plate emerged. The shooter had either avoided cameras or planned the approach carefully. Analysts speculated the suspect had knowledge of the area or had scouted it in advance. In the first week, over 100 tips were submitted to Crime Stoppers. None led to viable suspects. The case went cold faster than anyone expected, but Jaylen Thompson was not ready to let it go. He began compiling his own information, organizing timelines, gathering news clippings, and following social media threads. His garage business went on temporary hold. The investigation into the murder of Tiffany Brooks began within minutes of the shooting. Officers from the Atlanta Police Department established a perimeter around the crime scene and began interviewing witnesses. Forensic specialists combed the area in search of physical evidence, but the results were limited. No shell casings were recovered. There were no visible signs of struggle, no personal items left behind, and no usable DNA or fingerprints. The wound pattern confirmed a close-range shot, likely from a small-caliber handgun. The trajectory suggested the shooter had fired from across the street while Tiffany was standing next to the passenger door of a parked vehicle. A nearby pharmacy's security camera recorded a single frame showing a person in dark clothing, moving quickly toward a narrow side street. The image was partially obscured by glare. The suspect's face was not visible. No vehicle was seen. Investigators described the footage as inconclusive. Witness statements varied. Most agreed the shooter appeared male, of average build, and wore a hooded jacket. No one could confirm whether he arrived on foot or by car. A canvass of the neighborhood produced no additional video angles. By the second day, APD publicly acknowledged the absence of leads. A press conference held by Lieutenant Samuel Ruiz of the Homicide Unit confirmed that the investigation was ongoing, but described the case as complex, with minimal traceable evidence. Jaylen Thompson began his own inquiry almost immediately. Though not formally trained in investigation, he had a clear understanding of timelines, logistical planning, and attention to detail, skills he often used managing his auto shop. He started by organizing all public information related to the case: witness statements, press releases, and surveillance footage breakdowns. In early August 2023, Jaylen found a case in Miami, Florida, involving the fatal shooting of a 29-year-old woman named Carla Menendez. She had been shot in broad daylight while walking out of a community health clinic. The method was nearly identical. One shot, no suspects, no shell casings. A witness described a man with a tattoo on the left side of his neck fleeing the scene. The Miami Police Department had not made an arrest. The case had gone cold. Jaylen contacted the Miami detectives but received no response. He submitted a request through the public records portal to access the initial incident report and autopsy summary. After reviewing the documents, he noted 2 points. Carla Menendez had worked in patient intake at the clinic, and the location of her wound was consistent with Tiffany's. Jaylen compiled both case timelines side by side. He noted that Carla had been killed on May 17, 2023, less than 4 weeks before Tiffany. The similarities were too specific to ignore. He contacted Atlanta detectives to share the findings. The response was limited. According to Jaylen's later statement, the department acknowledged the report but stated there was no direct connection at that time. With no formal cross-jurisdiction investigation opened, Jaylen made a decision. In early September 2023, Jaylen traveled to Miami on his own. He visited the clinic where Carla Menendez had worked. He spoke with employees and community members. One security guard, who had worked the week of the shooting, recalled seeing a man with a neck tattoo several times around the building. The man had never entered, only lingered nearby. No one knew his name. Jaylen visited the nearby bus terminal. After speaking with vendors and reviewing open camera placements, he was directed to a local informant known for assisting with undocumented travel. The man, whose name was not disclosed publicly, confirmed that he had arranged private transport for an American male matching the description in late May. The route went to Havana, Cuba, through an offshore charter network. He began his search at the Miami Intermodal Center, the main transportation hub for buses and regional travel. Over the course of 2 days, he questioned vendors, security personnel, and drivers operating on regular and informal routes. According to him, the man had asked for directions to a private shuttle that operated off the books and typically transported passengers to coastal launch points for travel to Cuba. Jaylen followed the lead. Through a chain of contacts, mostly individuals connected to informal maritime transport, he was introduced to a man known to arrange unregistered boat trips from Key Largo to Havana. The man, whose identity is redacted in official records, initially denied involvement. Jaylen offered a payment of $3,000. The organizer provided a photograph taken with a smartphone. It showed a man boarding a small vessel, wearing a black shirt and carrying a duffel bag. His neck tattoo was visible, although slightly blurred. Jaylen took a copy and returned to his hotel. Within 48 hours, he had booked a flight to Havana. He entered Cuba through José Martí International Airport on September 9th. He registered under his real name, listing tourism as the reason for his visit. His travel documents were valid, and no authorities intervened. Once inside Havana, Jaylen began asking about the man in the photograph. He visited bars, small ports, and hostel-style accommodations frequented by foreigners or transient workers. Most people said nothing. Eventually, he encountered a mechanic near the harbor who recognized the man in the photo. The mechanic claimed the man had arrived by boat weeks earlier and stayed for a short period. According to him, the man had left Havana within a few days. The direction: Jamaica. Jaylen traveled to Jamaica on September 17th, taking a local charter. There, he followed the same process, avoiding authorities, moving quietly, showing the photograph to people in the margins of society. A taxi driver in a working-class neighborhood mentioned that a man with a similar tattoo had been seen in Spanish Town. an area roughly 25 kilometers west of Kingston, known for high crime rates and underground fighting circuits. Jaylen entered Spanish Town on September 19th. The man Jaylen confronted in Spanish Town was identified as Malik Stanton, an American citizen and former U.S. Army infantryman. Records show that Stanton served 2 tours in Iraq between 2006 and 2011, before receiving a general discharge. After his return to the U.S., Stanton worked sporadically in private security and underground fight promotion, often moving between cities. In 2021, he left the country and began operating in the Caribbean under false names. In his time in Spanish Town, Stanton maintained a low profile, using his military background to build authority in local fighting circles. He operated as both a trainer and enforcer within an illegal fighting circuit. Most locals knew him only by his first name. He avoided digital traces and had no known social media accounts or electronic footprint in Jamaica. On September 22, 2023, during a covert meeting arranged by Jaylen Thompson, Stanton was pressured into a confrontation that led to an informal confession. While not admissible in court at that point, the audio recording captured several incriminating statements. Stanton initially denied involvement in any U.S.-based crime. However, under sustained questioning and physical intimidation from Jaylen, he admitted to carrying out a contract job in Atlanta. Stanton did not identify the client by name, but confirmed that Tiffany Brooks had become a target due to a conversation she overheard at her workplace, Emory University Hospital. 1 week prior to her death, Tiffany had been present near a patient room during a verbal altercation involving an unidentified man with a known criminal history. According to Stanton, the man had a pending federal investigation related to information trafficking and was using aliases to conceal past activity. Tiffany reportedly overheard part of the conversation and later mentioned it to a colleague, unaware of its sensitivity. The incident, as described by Stanton, triggered a response. His client, acting through intermediaries, determined that Tiffany posed a potential liability. The directive given to Stanton was initially to make contact and ensure silence. This typically implied intimidation, not execution. However, Stanton assessed the situation independently. Tiffany said she would tell her husband everything. Stanton claimed that he acted preemptively. The shooting was not improvised. He selected the location, waited outside the salon, and fired once before fleeing on foot. He disposed of the weapon before leaving the state and made his way to Florida within 36 hours. From there, he used unregulated transport channels to reach Cuba and later Jamaica. Upon returning to the United States, Jaylen submitted the full recording, along with all supporting material, to the FBI field office in Houston. He also handed over the photo of Stanton boarding the vessel to Havana and copies of local witness statements from Spanish Town. The case was escalated to a multi-agency task force, which began proceedings to verify Stanton's identity, location, and criminal liability. Malik Stanton was placed under international alert status through Interpol. U.S. Marshals began coordinating with Jamaican law enforcement. On October 11, 2023, Stanton was apprehended outside a gym in Montego Bay during a coordinated joint operation. He did not resist arrest. Upon extradition to the United States, Stanton was formally charged with the murder of Tiffany Brooks, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and illegal flight to avoid prosecution. He was transported to federal custody in Texas, where his preliminary hearing was held on October 23. Prosecutors requested no bail, citing the risk of flight and the gravity of the offense. During the arraignment, Stanton entered a plea of not guilty. His defense team filed a motion to suppress the confession, arguing that it was obtained under duress and outside legal jurisdiction. The court scheduled a hearing to review the admissibility of the evidence. Meanwhile, investigators obtained hospital security records and verified that a known criminal associate, linked to multiple identity fraud cases, had indeed been admitted as a patient in Emory Hospital during the same week Tiffany worked that unit. Though the patient's identity was sealed, internal memos confirmed that a security concern had been flagged the same day Tiffany was on duty. Jaylen Thompson returned to the United States on September 25, 2023. He arrived through Houston, Texas, and immediately contacted federal authorities. Within 24 hours, he submitted all gathered materials to the FBI. The audio recording of Malik Stanton's confession, photographs from Miami and Jamaica, written witness statements, and a detailed personal timeline documenting his actions from the day of Tiffany Brooks's murder. Federal investigators began a formal case review. Forensic audio experts authenticated the recording. Linguistic analysis confirmed consistency with known speech samples of Stanton obtained from prior military records. The voice print was admissible. More significantly, Stanton's statements contained references to details that had never been released to the public, including Tiffany's route to the salon and specific phrases used in the hospital setting. Cooperation between the FBI, the U.S. Marshals Service, and Jamaican authorities resulted in Stanton's arrest on October 11 in Montego Bay. He was transported under guard to federal custody in Texas. Upon arrival, he declined to speak with investigators. He entered a plea of not guilty during his initial court appearance on October 23. Stanton's legal team argued that the confession obtained in Jamaica was inadmissible. They claimed it had been extracted under coercion, outside any legal jurisdiction, and without the presence of legal counsel. A suppression hearing was scheduled to review the validity of the evidence. Meanwhile, investigators expanded their focus beyond Stanton. Through analysis of phone records, financial transactions, and travel data, they began reconstructing the network that facilitated the operation. Key findings included geolocation data. Stanton's cell phone was traced to Atlanta, Georgia, between June 10 and June 14, 2023. His signal was recorded within a 3-block radius of the crime scene on the morning of the shooting. Financial transactions. A series of unregistered digital transfers were traced to a cryptocurrency wallet believed to be used by intermediaries. The transfers began one day after Tiffany overheard the hospital conversation and ended 2 days before the murder. Transportation links. Individuals who had assisted Stanton in traveling from Florida to Cuba were interviewed. One confirmed receiving cash payments from a third party acting as a go-between. The timeline matched Jaylen's report. These supporting materials reinforced the authenticity of the confession. Prosecutors argued that Stanton's statements aligned with verifiable data, making them reliable even if obtained under informal circumstances. The presiding judge allowed the recording to remain in evidence pending a full trial review. Further inquiry into the unidentified hospital patient, who had triggered the chain of events, yielded key results. Internal hospital security logs confirmed that on June 6, 2023, a male patient using an alias was temporarily held under observation for complications related to minor surgery. During his stay, a private conversation was overheard near the nurse's station by Tiffany Brooks. The nature of the conversation involved reference to sensitive personal data and undisclosed business connections, potentially implicating the patient in a larger criminal enterprise. Hospital staff later reported that Tiffany had asked informal questions about the patient's record, but had not filed any complaints or alerts. According to one colleague, she had planned to tell Jaylen about what she'd heard after the wedding. That conversation never happened. Federal prosecutors linked the alias used by the patient to a known identity broker operating out of New Jersey. Though this individual was not charged in connection with Tiffany's death, the FBI opened a separate case related to illegal data transfers and patient information fraud. Investigators acknowledged that Tiffany's knowledge, even partial, could have jeopardized the anonymity of key figures in that network. The trial of Malik Stanton commenced on February 5, 2024, in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Texas. It would last nearly 11 months. The case was closely monitored by both federal and local media, not only because of the nature of the crime, but because of how it had been uncovered, through the actions of a civilian outside official law enforcement channels. Stanton was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. The prosecution entered over 24 pieces of evidence, including the audio recording captured by Jaylen Thompson in Jamaica, travel records, financial transactions, expert forensic testimony, and corroborating witness accounts from multiple countries. The defense focused primarily on the admissibility of the confession. They argued it had been obtained under duress, outside U.S. jurisdiction, and without due legal procedure. They claimed that Stanton had been physically threatened and manipulated into speaking. Multiple motions were filed to exclude the recording. All were denied. The court ruled that the confession, while obtained outside conventional legal frameworks, met the threshold for admissibility due to its corroboration by independent data. GPS logs, financial evidence, and third-party confirmations. The voice on the recording was authenticated by 2 separate forensic experts. Additionally, statements made by Stanton included precise details that had not been publicly disclosed, reinforcing their credibility. Witnesses for the prosecution included federal agents, data analysts, and medical personnel from Emory University Hospital. They testified to the presence of a high-risk patient under alias, the lack of reporting by Tiffany Brooks, and the internal flag raised following the conversation she overheard. The timeline was reconstructed with clarity. Jaylen Thompson was called but ultimately not required to testify. His role was acknowledged as the originator of key evidence, but the court chose not to introduce his personal involvement further, avoiding any perception of vigilante justice. Stanton remained silent throughout most of the trial. He declined to take the stand. His legal team continued to argue procedural impropriety, but presented no alternative theory of the crime. No witnesses were introduced to counter the forensic timeline or dispute the travel data. On January 9, 2025, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge addressed the courtroom directly, stating that the murder of Tiffany Brooks had been a deliberate act intended to obstruct the truth and eliminate risk to a criminal enterprise. The judge further emphasized that the absence of remorse and the nature of Stanton's actions merited the maximum penalty. Malik Stanton was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Jaylen Thompson did not speak publicly after the verdict. He attended the sentencing but gave no statement to press or court. According to court observers, he exited the building alone and did not pause.